go.
Welcome to NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill on 710 WOR.
Welcome. I'm Jeffrey Hill, your host, right here on 710 WOR Radio in New York City. With me is my producer, the famous Anthony Filippio.
Is all of your holiday shopping done?
I've been making a mark. You know what I'm saying?
I went to Amazon. I think I got it done within 15 minutes. So
all right. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
There's nothing like Jeff Bezos to make things simpler, right? You get up at 2 in the morning, you put your list in front of you, and you say, listen, I got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
I think I'll buy some stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard that they just refused FedEx to do FedEx Ground or FedEx Overnight. So basically, Bezos' team said, you're not doing a good enough job. We're cutting you off.
Oh, wow.
And they said, oh, no problem. We have plenty of business. Meanwhile, that's a $900 million contract. I have a feeling it might hurt just a little bit.
Wow.
Okay, so let's move on, ladies and gentlemen, and
What a way to start.
Yeah, exactly right. All right, let's tell the folks how they can find us. We're available right here, as I said, every Sunday morning at 8 a.m., and then we become a podcast, as you all know, on Spotify, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. We're also available as a YouTube, so hopefully some of you are watching the show, and all of which can be found at NYCBD Official. All right, let's move on and review the typical 4 segments of the show. Normally, notice I say normally because I'm going to change the plan today. Our first segment is called Cannabis in the Tri-State +1, one being Massachusetts, where I update you on key cannabis issues in all 4 states. The second segment is called Stunning and Amazing Facts, what I consider to be the most relevant issues in the space since last week. Every segment is called a
Stunner.
God, are we good at this? Yes?
Yeah.
I think we're going to start a little song.
You ask, I answer.
Yes, Stunner. The Stunner song. The Stunner, well, I don't know. I'll have to work on that.
I'll get a jingle.
As a marketing person, I ought to be able to do
Have
better.
Jimmy do a jingle.
Have Jimmy do a jingle, all right? The double J, we'll call it. Today, we're going to do something a little different and combine the first 2 segments into one.
So a sandwich of segments.
There you go. So why, Flips is asking? Well, the answer is this past week in Las Vegas, the industry had the most important conference in the world of cannabis called MJBiz Con.
Did you go out?
I did go out, and not only that.
I mean, go out, out to a club's out.
Oh, no, I went out to Las Vegas out and stayed with some wonderful friends of mine. Okay. We're going to just name their first name, Phil and Sue, and so a special thanks goes out to Phil and Sue. I will admit
so
the fact.
You didn't go to Hakkasan? You didn't go to any of the clubs?
I just went to the show, and I went to the surroundings around the show. There's several events and things of that nature.
So you're a good boy this time.
Well, I did my best because, I had a little bit of work to do. We did a lot of good interviews, and ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear some of those interviews on the show. Indeed, this show, you're going to hear a wonderful person. So for perspective on this show, 6 years ago, the show had how many people? How about 400? How many do you think this show had, Flipsy?
I would say over 40,000.
35,000 people came to the show from over 70 countries.
In
right?
6 years, that's pretty good.
Pretty remarkable, right? I brought a remote crew with me, and you'll hear some of the interviews we shot, as I mentioned, over the next few shows. The third segment, today's guest, was shot literally in Las Vegas with Nancy Whiteman. Nancy is the CEO of Wana Brands, the leading edibles business in the space, recently been named by Entrepreneur Magazine as the Martha Stuart of Cannabis, which does her a little bit of a disjustice, I would say, or an injustice. The woman is a remarkable business person, and she's been named one of the most powerful women in cannabis as well. Lastly, we will end the show with our fourth segment called Your Messages, providing answers to the most interesting direct messages Flips received following last week's show. We're giving Flips full ownership there.
Unless they're bad.
Unless they're bad.
Then it's Garen.
It's Garen or Jeffrey, of course. All right, we'll be back to open our show with a review of the MJ Business activity right after this.
The Alchemist Kitchen celebrates the power of plants. They're the leading destination in New York City for CBD. Their organic CBD hemp flower is grown in upstate New York. So come on down and talk to one of their herbalists to learn about how CBD may relieve stress, anxiety, and pain. Located at 21 East 1st Street, right near the Bowery. Mention NYCBD for special savings for your first purchase. See you soon. Or visit them online at thealchemistkitchen.com. That's the ALCHEMIST kitchen.com.
Welcome back to NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill, right here on 710 WOR Radio every Sunday at 8 a.m. Don't forget we have a blog, my blog, medium.com/@JeffreyHill2. That's medium.com/@JeffreyHill2. I've been writing quite a bit more in the blog, and hopefully I'll start hearing from some of you folks on what you are looking for Otherwise, I'm just following my own nose and doing the best I can. All right, before we get to the MJBiz show, there is one critical thing I want to recognize. Major League Baseball, who would have believed I would have started there, and its players' union announced last week that marijuana will be removed from its list of banned substances and that players will be tested for major opioids, cocaine, and other drugs in a new treatment-based approach to drug use. Marijuana will be treated the same as alcohol, the agreement said, and suspension for its use will be dropped from the minor league drug program as well. Players will not be subjected to discipline for testing positive for marijuana, but rather for conduct while under the influence. The announcement between MLB and the association said. So
That's
what is that?
Huge.
Yeah, it's incredibly huge. So what that means is it recognizes the fact that cannabis is being used medicinally by a number of players, not only in baseball, but many other sports. We had a number of shows where we talked about sports. In fact, we even talked about the hockey league, right?
Yeah.
So NHL has already completely decriminalized it, and they test for it, but simply to become aware of the different things people are putting inside their bodies, their players, that is. We all know that in Canada, it's adult use legal, where the majority of hockey players continue to come from, right? Okay, so they figured it out, and now the MLB is beginning to figure it out. And here's the good news. Those players that want to deal with inflammation, they want to deal with quick recovery time, all the dynamics that cannabis and CBD can deliver, now can use the product as they always have been without fear of retribution, all right? Players and team staff will have to attend mandatory education programs in 2020 and 21 on the dangers of opioid pain medications and practical approaches to marijuana. So what are they saying? They're saying that we understand that opioids are painkillers. And when you're in significant pain as a player, you still have to go out and play 162 games a year, at least as many as you can, right? Okay, so they understand that opioids are necessary but must be managed. They also understand that marijuana is completely different than what is an opioid, yet at the federal level, they're both considered Schedule I drugs, right? However, many states and many countries have recognized the differences, and heaven forbid, now has Major League Baseball. The changes go into effect at the beginning of 2020 spring training. All right, talk about opioid testing began following the death of Los Angeles pitcher Tyler Skaggs, who was found dead in his hotel room in the Dallas area in July. An autopsy of the 27-year-old showed oxycodone, fentanyl, and alcohol in his system. His death launched a discussion about opioids in sports. Union head Tony Clark said it was difficult to gauge how many players were using opioids. Players from our side of the equation recognized that there was an opportunity to take a leadership role here in this discussion, Clark said. Players aren't immune to issues that affect all of us. And so the situation this year only heightened that, brought it even closer to home, all right? So that indeed is very real, ladies and gentlemen. The fundamental differences between real drug abuse, I use the term abuse, as opposed to using certain things like cannabis and CBD for medicinal reasons. Let's agree that is not abuse. That is helping your own personal wellness. All right, let's move on with a review of the MJBiz show in Las Vegas. As I mentioned, this is considered the most important show in the industry and is attended by virtually everyone in the global world of cannabis. Members of the cannabis industry's brain trust used the first day of MJBiz to share predictions for 2020 and describe how changing attitudes in the U.S. might affect future marijuana legalization efforts. In his keynote presentation Wednesday, Chris Walsh, a president and incoming CEO of Marijuana Business Daily, reviewed some of the cannabis industry's significant wins in the U.S., Canada, and other global markets in 2019, but also underlined and underscored some of the major challenges. An example of a big win in 2019 occurred when Illinois became the first state in the country to legalize adult use cannabis cultivation and sale through its legislature, meaning the legislature voted and therefore it became so. But the news from New York and New Jersey was not as good, as those states did not move marijuana legalization forward. I've discussed the situation in both New York and New Jersey at length on our show in our first segment, which you all know is Cannabis in the Tri-State +1, and we talk about all of these states, of course. New Jersey is headed to a public referendum with Governor Phil Murphy, who is in full support of the space, but unfortunately Can't connect with his state Senate president, Stephen Sweeney, the Democrat from Gloucester, who was very unhappy with the governor's executive orders in cannabis since he became governor. All right? We've also covered New York's Governor Cuomo, who is also a big supporter, but struggled getting the bill out of his own legislature as well. Both governors believe 2020 will be the year of adult use legalization. All right, so what's happening, ladies and gentlemen? It's beginning to be broadly understood that cannabis and CBD has medicinal value, right? While it's not necessarily clinically proven at the level that pharmaceutical products must go through, which is years and years of new drug applications, etc., as a supplement, as an additive, as something to add to your overall health and wellness, it is beginning to be generally accepted that good things come from it, okay? However, these governors have a number of challenges ahead of them, many of which are political. If you go to the legislatures, they will say that somewhere between 85 and 95% of our population wants to see adult use medicinal cannabis product, right? 85 to 95%. Quinnipiac polls, poll after poll after poll. All right, well, why can't they get it done? Isn't their responsibility to bring forward legislation that addresses 90% of their patient population? Or excuse me, in this case, their voting population? Of course it is. Why can't they get it done? Flips, why can't they get it done?
Just don't want to work together.
Exactly right. They can't get it done for the same reason.
Can't get out of their own way.
We can't get things done at the federal level either, because everybody seems to be in cement. So if you're a Republican and you take position A and I'm a Democrat and I take position B, or the opposite, right? By definition, we start disagreeing, right? As opposed to looking for what's in the best interest of our constituency and moving forward on that level. All right, let's move on. California marijuana companies have also struggled with a very challenging business and regulatory environment. And headlines around layoffs resulted was another big discussion at MJBiz. While this issue was just top-lined at the conference, I wanted to bring some additional perspective. So here you go. Some industry watchers say they predicted a substantial downturn in cannabis in California now that it has become a 3-year regulated adult use state, right? They foresaw the rush to invest in fledgling marijuana companies with unrealistic revenue targets. They warned against hefty taxes from the state and local governments, angling to gain from those promised returns, right? Keep in mind, those states that moved in favor of cannabis did so specifically for a number of reasons, often led by the money, right? Tax money. The so-called green rush of investment and entrepreneurship arrived with marijuana's legalization in 2016, as did whole new categories of jobs and potential funding sources for schools, road repairs, and a whole host of other things. Then more than 3/4 of cities and counties across the state did what? What if I said they banned dispensaries and other cannabis companies? Because despite the fact that the state said let's move forward, each individual municipality gets to vote, and they voted no. Now hundreds of people working in California's cannabis industry are losing their jobs, while California's decades-old black market is still thriving. Several large cannabis companies, including CannaCraft, Sonoma County's largest homegrown cannabis manufacturer, FlowCanna, a major cannabis brand from Northern California's Emerald Triangle, laid off about 20% of the workforce. Other California cannabis juggernauts announced layoffs in October. What about Weed Maps? I think everybody all over the country knows what Weed Maps is. Their CEO, Chris Beals, announced on Twitter last month that his company fired 25% of the cannabis retail advertiser employees. Ease, a San Francisco-based tech platform that helps dispensaries manage deliveries, let go 20% of their people. Everything was going really well. Then all of a sudden, we weren't hitting targets, right? And everybody was retracting, said Dennis Hunter, a founder of Santa Rosa's CannaCraft. We had to make the responsible decision to cut our costs. After all, we are a business. Burdensome taxes, complex regulation, and not enough legal dispensaries to get products in front of consumers in California have created a tough economic atmosphere, according to many cannabis business leaders. Then California announced that it will increase taxes for cannabis business starting in Jan 1. Let's think about that, ladies and gentlemen. In the state of Colorado, as we've discussed before, 80% of the business is done legally and 20% is still done in the gray market. In California, it's exactly the opposite. There's a 3x business of illegal to legal. Part of the reason is, as you continue to add on taxes, the difference between legal and illegal gets greater, and the quality of the illegal product, often bought by in the legal market, becomes quite good. So why, as a consumer needing to buy medicinal product, would I walk into a dispensary and pay 40% in tax, 30%, whatever it may be, if I can get the exact same product on the black market and feel comfortable about its quality? So there you go. Listen to this line. People are gobsmacked. Let me repeat that. Gobsmacked, Gobsmacked, said Elizabeth Ashford, Senior Director of Corporate Communications with Ease. Don't know what gobsmacked means, but what do you think it means, Flips?
Well, I just cheated and looked it up.
Is it a word?
Yeah, it means
it is?
astounded.
Oh, my God. Well, I was going to go with astounded. I didn't know, but I was going to say it should be one of our stunners, i.e. astounded. All right. It's very hard to overstate the impact that on top of everything else, Ease's Ashford said of the tax hike, you've had capital markets literally dry up. Banking solutions have failed to materialize. The illicit market is the vast majority of the market here. Okay, so there's the problem. So here's my perspective. There's always been a misperception from people outside the cannabis industry that it's a gold mine. Companies were able to raise a lot of money, expand rapidly, and delay having to deal with market realities. Well, guess what? Market realities are setting in. Look at the category and what it's dealing with. Cannabis companies still can't access traditional banking services. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. If you were running a business and you couldn't do business with your bank, or what if I told you couldn't do business with credit cards, that the entire business had to be in cash, and you were doing, if you're a dispensary, $8 to $12 million a year? Imagine the pain and anguish of dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash every single day. What do I do with all that cash? There's literally a Brinks truck lining up at these dispensaries virtually everywhere in the state. All right? What about a bridge loan that offers businesses short-term cash infusions? Can't get those. All right, so these companies can't even deduct their own business expenses because of some interesting tax law called 280E. All right, which says you can't deduct expenses from a company that is selling what? Selling illegal products. Illegal products where? In California it's legal. Well, no, it's not legal at the federal level where it's a Schedule 1. You pay your taxes to the federal government, at least the federal tax you do. Meanwhile, the black market is thriving. Consumers in California are expected to spend almost $9 billion on illegal cannabis in 2019, compared to legal sales of only $3.1 billion. Who said that? BDS Analytics says that. They are one of the preeminent data suppliers in the space. Recall we had Roy Bingham on the show. Roy was the CEO of BDS Analytics, and when I quote numbers, I often quote their numbers, right? That's nearly $3 spent in the black market, as I mentioned earlier, for every $1 spent in the legal market. The cost to buy cannabis products at the dispensary is 45% higher than it costs to buy unregulated product. New retail stores also haven't opened up at the pace, matching what? Matching the other components of the supply chain, manufacturing and other producers, right? California has the lowest number of marijuana stores for its population among states with legal sales, with only one licensed retailer for every 35,000 adults 21 years or over, according once again to BDS Analytics. The main reason for this problem is there are not enough retailers and not enough shelves to support the size of the supply chain in California, said Michael Stenmetz, Flow Canna founder. Right? The downturn in California has combined with a major market reset in Canada, where those of you who are following know that publicly traded cannabis companies have suffered major losses. Net, the world's largest publicly traded cannabis company, Ontario-based Canopy Growth Corp., saw the value of its shares plummet almost 65% to what is about $20 compared to its $53 position in April. All right? Okay, so all these things were discussed at the show, and I just wanted to bring you the best I could of some of that message, right? So let's get back to some of the other issues they discussed. Of course, they discussed the vape crisis, which also sent ripples through the industry, both in the U.S. and Canada. The industry took a hurt earlier this year when people who use vaporizers, also known as vapes or e-cigs, started to get serious lung illnesses. You all know about that, right? So local cannabis industry professionals have said that the additive, which has been isolated as causing the problem in the vape, right, is not in their products. So that brings on the question, right? Why aren't we isolating the bad guys and moving on with the market, which was a big discussion at the show. President of Marijuana Business Daily, Mr. Walsh made several predictions about what marijuana businesses around the world will watch for in 2020. Nothing amazing here or stunning. Potential state crackdowns around taxes, corruption, and safety was his first conclusion. Headwinds in some international markets, possibly Colombia and Latin America. I plan to do an entire show on the international marketplace and possibly even do specifics on what's happening in Southeast Asia versus what's happening in South America. The California market could get even worse before it gets better. The Canadian market will stabilize before the end of the year. All right, other key points made included the number of Americans in favor of marijuana legalization is 5 times higher than it was 50 years ago, according to who? Tom Daschle, a former U.S. Senator from South Dakota. Was he there? Of course he was there. Was his organization there? And his son, who's now the CEO of his consulting practice? Of course they were all there. I'm the personification of that change in attitude, he said, the former member Senate Majority Leader. While Daschle said he is not completely in favor of full adult use marijuana legalization, he sits on the board of Clever Leaves, a Columbia-based cannabis company, and cited the plant's potential to improve quality of life for medical patients, particularly those with seizure disorders and veterans. All right, think about that. What does that say? It says there's nothing wrong with being completely in favor of medicinal cannabis and against the adult use market. Right, because medicinal cannabis is where the health comes from, and that's Daschle's position. So he talking out of both sides of his mouth? I would submit not. However, possibly sitting on the board of a cannabis company could allow people to be confused. All right, but you can laugh if you want,
Very
right?
confused.
But the bottom line is this. If it's a medicinal cannabis company, I say more power to them, right? Because that company is saving lives and changing lives in the areas of PTSD, autism, epilepsy, and et cetera. And if there's a lot of adult use users that they can also satisfy, I say that pays the bills.
Also, at least he
right?
has a position.
Right. To me, those companies, remember what Dr. Koltai said from the Vulcany Institute. How do you feel, I asked them, about adult use when all they do is study the medical value of the space in Israel? And her answer, it pays the bills. And that's what Heather Jackson said too, right? Heather said the same thing. How do you feel since your entire life is spent devoted to epilepsy and autism patients, of which your own children lived through this, and so did, as we all remember, Charlotte Figi and the Charlotte Figi story. They all grew up together and had these problems. And when we asked her, how do you feel about adult use? She said, helps pay the foundation. Right? Yeah. Okay, so there you go. There's nothing wrong with a category that has medicinal applications that is also used in other ways. Right? If I can use cannabis to fall asleep, does that make me a bad guy? I would submit not. All right. The discussion then went on to make some predictions regarding 2020 and a panel that included 4 important people. First, Linda Mercado Green, owner and CEO of the woman-owned Anacostia Organics. Second, Stephen Hawkins, executive director of the Marijuana Policy Project, the largest organization working solely on marijuana policy reform in the U.S. Third, Adam Goers, vice president, corporate affairs for Columbia Care, another major dispensary owner in the U.S. And lastly, Nathan Daschle. Daschle. Sound familiar? Yes, president and CEO of the Daschle Group, and yes, the son of Tom Daschle. All right. They forecast ballot measures or legislative action on adult use marijuana in established medicinal marijuana states in Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, and New York, 2 of which we include on the show every week, New Jersey and New York. All right, so let's see if they're right. Steve Hawkins from the Marijuana Policy Project said he believes new medical cannabis markets in Missouri and Oklahoma might take action also. The panel was bullish on cannabis markets in states that previously seemed unlikely. How about Idaho, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Nebraska? All right, if you're getting movement in some of those states, I would say the movement is continuing. The speakers also agreed there might be greater business motion towards medical marijuana in Virginia as well. All right? Virginia is a really great place for cannabis entrepreneurs, said Adam Goers, the vice president of the corporate affairs of Columbia Care, partly because of the state's proximity to adult use markets in Maryland and Washington, D.C. So keep in mind, everyone, as a market like Massachusetts and another market like Vermont both become adult use, it puts pressure on adjacent states, right, who may not be adult use. The whole cross-border issue, people going across the border to buy product and taking it back across the border creates a lot of pressure on the adjacent states to move faster. So that becomes a very political discussion. All right, let's move on. I hope you'll be pleased to know we brought our entire production crew with us out to Las Vegas. So when we come back, we will do the next segment of our show, today's guest from the press tent at the show. Our guest will be Nancy Whiteman, CEO of Wana Brands, one of the most powerful edible brands in the category. In fact, Nancy, a remarkable woman, was named one of the most powerful women in cannabis. So come on right back.
The Alchemist Kitchen celebrates the power of plants. They're the leading destination in New York City for CBD. Their organic CBD hemp flower is grown in upstate New York. So come on down and talk to one of their herbalists to learn about how CBD may relieve stress, anxiety, and pain. Located at 21 East 1st Street, right near the Bowery. Mention NYCBD for special savings for your first purchase. See you soon. Or visit them online at thealchemistkitchen.com. That's the ALCHEMIST kitchen.com.
So I'm sitting here with Nancy Whiteman, CEO of Wana Brands. We have an interesting thing in common. We are both alumni of the University of Massachusetts, which makes me very excited. So welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Well, for all of you listening, we are literally recording from the MJBiz floor in the press booth, an exciting place for me to find myself since I'm usually one of the manufacturers representing my brands. So I'm very excited to talk to Nancy about a number of things she's doing. Let's start out by how you got into the cannabis space, an interesting place for somebody of your skills to be at this point.
Yes. Long story short, I got into the space because I had a neighbor who was building an infused soda pop company, and my partner and I ended up joining forces with him and building out a kitchen. Initially, I really didn't know that much about the use of cannabis for medical purposes. Of course, it was all medical at that point. I certainly knew it well for recreational purposes, but I was just interested in the business opportunity. But once we got into it, and I started to get a lot of feedback from patients and customers on how much it was helping them, I became very committed to it medicinally, very impressed with the power of the plants and what it was doing for people. So my motivation shifted over time.
No, that's very understandable. In fact, this is my 32nd show. I've done 32 weeks of the show, and our entire focus is medicinal also. And we had Tripp on our show a number of times. You know Tripp, yes?
I do.
Tripp Keeber?
Sure.
Was he perhaps involved in your initial activity in the beverage business?
No, he was not. It wasn't Tripp. It was somebody else. But Dixie and Wana both started around the same time. I like to say we're both part of the OG of edibles manufacturers in Colorado.
Well, I would agree with that, certainly. And I've looked in preparation for this meeting, just to let my audience know, Queen of Legal Cannabis, named May of 2017. The Martha Stuart of Edibles, named by Entrepreneur Magazine in January of 19. The number 3 most powerful woman in cannabis. So you've got a number of titles in the space, so you've obviously made your mark. Can you tell us a little bit about the chronology of Wana and how you built such a spectacular reputation?
Sure. Well, you know, what I would say is that when we started, which was in 2010, it was really the Wild West in Colorado. There was very little regulations. There was no requirement for third-party lab testing. There was no child-resistant packaging. There was no seed-to-sale tracking. So we were really making it up as we went along. We just tried a whole bunch of different stuff. But relatively early on, we hit on gummies as a category that we were very interested in. And the more we got interested in it, the more we put our resources against it. And as it turned out, gummies have ended up being by far the dominant category in edibles. So in some ways, we just got very lucky because we chose a great category. But we also executed very well. We spent a lot of time and energy really getting our recipe to the point where it was scalable and delicious and didn't get sticky and icky when it got warm out and all of that sort of thing. And then we were very, very diligent right from the start about consistency. Even though there were no requirements to third-party lab test, we did anyway. And consistency is super important when it comes to an edibles product because many people have either experienced or heard stories about people who took a little bit too much with edibles, and it's an uncomfortable experience. I never wanted anybody to have that experience with my products. So literally from the first batch, we third-party lab tested them. And even now, if you ask people what they like about Wana, they will tell you it's consistent. It's the same every single time.
Right, so the gummy business has become a significant percentage of total edibles, and it maintains that position. But you guys involved one across a number of form factors. Is that correct?
Yes. So in addition to gummies, we also have a vape line. We have a pressed tart, sort of similar to a sweet tart. We have a hard candy. And we have a line of extended release capsules, which we developed in conjunction with an Israeli pharmaceutical company.
Right. Now, so we've had a number of Israeli pharmaceutical companies on the show. Do you mind sharing with us who that is?
Oh, not at all. It's their company is called Cannabis.
Okay, very, very good. So let's go back and chat a little bit about the medicinal side now, because when our listenership hears gummies, they wonder about microdosing, and they wonder about the medicinal side. We've had a number of military folks with PTSD. We had a woman named Dr. Hinani Koltai from the Volky Institute in Israel, and we have stressed at great length both sides of the space, but really, kind of my personal point of view is the medicinal side of the space is kind of, why certainly I'm in it, right? So share with us a little bit about the connection between an edible line and the medicinal side, please.
Right. So sometimes people have a misunderstanding that the products, medicinal products and recreational products, are actually somehow different products. They're actually not. Dosages may vary, but the products themselves basically work the same way, whether they're being used medicinally or for recreational purposes. What is extremely important, though, from a medicinal point of view, is that the product be very homogeneous, so that you can cut it. You can take one of our gummies, you can cut it in fourths, and you'll get exactly 1/4 of the medicine.
So it's perfectly microdosed then?
It is. It's perfect for microdosing. And it's... we're now starting to do a lot of work with looking into adding other, both rare cannabinoids and also functional ingredients to our products. We're very health and wellness focused.
So talk to me a little bit about the research side of your enterprise. When you're talking about health and wellness focus, obviously that starts to look more medicinal, starts to feel more medicinal, and even though what I'll call adult use product can also be used medicinally, which we know, at least for now, help us understand the science behind what you're doing.
So we actually have a director of innovation, and his job is to really scour the universe for people who are doing the most innovative and interesting things from a medicinal point of view. So we have chosen to partner with people rather than to hire our own cadre of PhD scientists to develop our own in-house technology, because A, we think it allows us to move more quickly, and B, it makes us not get locked into any particular technology because it keeps improving and changing. So, for example, we are in the next couple of months releasing a line of quick release, quick onset products. We've been researching that category for over 2 years, trying everything on the market. So it's a lot of experimentation. Right now we're working a lot with sort of the rare cannabinoids and trying to come up with some formulations that are effective for that.
Well, and talking about this new line, this kind of quick release line, what are you suggesting are the indications for that kind of line?
In terms of health and wellness? For me, that one is less probably a specific issue and more what is it that you need the product to do for you. So for example, many people find that cannabis products are effective for anxiety or they're effective for sleep. If you're having an acute anxiety situation, you probably don't want to wait an hour for it to kick in. You'd really like it to kick in 5 to 15 minutes, right? So, and ditto for pain. If you're having a very acute pain, you don't really want to hang out for an hour in acute pain, right? So I think that it's less about the particular reason, whether it's pain or anxiety or sleep or whatever. It's less about the particular reason that you're using cannabis and more about what you want the experience to be in terms of onset and offset.
Right, which makes brilliant sense. Now, let me ask you this, if I may. So we've talked a lot about bioavailability, so not only speed of onset, but how much of the product that you're consuming is bioavailable, meaning for my listeners, available for the system, kind of for the percentage that becomes effective in the system. Talk a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Yes, that's a great point. So what you find with the onset technologies, the quick onset technologies, is they're basically tricking the body to a certain degree. So typically an edible, when it's consumed, goes through what they call first pass metabolism, which is metabolized through the liver, and it takes about an hour for that to happen. Because these products are encapsulated, and there's a variety of different technologies to do that, they go almost immediately into the bloodstream, which makes them far more bioavailable. For some people find that the quick onset products, for their milligrams, are actually stronger than the regular edibles are, just because the bioavailability is greater.
Fascinating. So let me ask you this. Obviously, as a woman and a leader in the business, I'm sure you've had a lot of conversation around this category and women that are really making a difference. So I come from a consumer packaged goods background, and I go back 40 plus years with many of my listeners who have run companies and are investors, etc. And this category literally started 10 years ago, and you helped start it. So talk a little bit about, you've certainly been acknowledged as a leading woman in the category, but talk a little bit about your thoughts on women in business, specifically in cannabis, please.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So when we started the company in 2010 in Colorado, it was relatively easy for anybody to get into the business, whether you're a man or a woman, because the barriers to entry were quite low. And so that meant that as long as you could drum up money to get a license and you didn't have a felony in your background, etc., you could get a license. So what you saw is that a lot of women did enter the business. What has happened since then is that, particularly in the states where they have limited licenses, and I would put all the East Coast states into that category, certainly Pennsylvania, Maryland, Florida, New Jersey, New York, they all fall into the limited license category. So what ended up happening in those situations is, in order to get a license, you needed to amass a lot of capital. You needed to show that you had a bunch of money in the bank. You needed to prove that you could build out a facility. And so the industry, I think, started to shift towards favoring those people who were more adept at gathering capital, i.e. men. So what I think has happened over time is that as you've got these large entities moving in, women who traditionally haven't had the same exposure to how to raise capital have actually become less a part of the industry at a more significant level. So I think that it's really, really important for women, and there are some accelerators out there that are really focused on women, to have mentorship that shows them how to go raise capital and how to get the money that they need to grow significant businesses.
I completely agree, and we have talked at great length on this show. We had Michaela Ramirez, who runs a foundation called the Poseidon Foundation, which focuses on at-risk young girls, but her entire emphasis is to first focus on at-risk and then kind of get the best out of young women and show them a path to not only get into, perhaps in her case, the Olympic Games, in this case of skateboarding, but also show them a path to begin to become more career-oriented, more career-affiliated. And the whole notion of show your value, or the concept of kind of women establishing themselves, I think is very real. And while I understand the challenges that you just dimensionalized, I think on balance, the category is ripe for a number of senior leadership on the female side. All right, let me shift back, if I can, to just a couple of other things. Let's talk a little bit about the national and international barriers. So when you're a cannabis business in state A, and then you're trying to do business in state B, you have a different set of laws, different set of issues, and you can't bring it across state line. So in just a few seconds, if you would, please, give us an idea for the kind of hoops you need to jump through to become more of a national brand, please.
Well, there's many of them. There's a lot of hoops. First, you have to figure out what your business model is in other states, and that can run the range from a licensing agreement where you're basically licensing your IP to building out your own facility in that state and getting a license yourself, and then there's everything in between.
Sure.
And there's many nuances in between. You can have somebody do contract manufacturing for you. You'd have to be operating under their license. You can put your own people in their facility. There's many variations on it. So that's part number one, is what's your business model. Part number two then is what does the state allow in terms of product form, product dosage, how you market it, how you talk about it, how you label it, how you package it. All of these things are different state by state. So it is quite like starting over every state you go into. And then, of course, the distribution is different in every state. So you have to start over there, too. It's not like, we're in Kroger's, yay!
Yeah.
You know? You really have to do the spade work in every state that you go into.
Right. So on the one hand, while very challenging and very difficult, on the other hand, at least for now, a bit of a barrier to entry in some respects, correct? Because those of you who fought your way through these multiple state situations are finding yourself in a position that many others are not. All right, let's move on. You are in the vaping business. And, of course, vaping has gotten some very serious national challenges. Again, we're here at the MJBiz show, and there's a number of folks, including PAX and others, that are into vaping. Jewel, of course, is here. Tell us a little bit about, if you would, your thoughts on vaping and how it's impacting your business.
Well, we do have a vape line. Of course, we were very concerned when the problem started to emerge. We know what we put in our vapes, which is basically just cannabis oil and terpenes. So we knew that we didn't have any additives, nothing that we were cutting it with. But it was a scary time because really nobody knew exactly what was happening. I think that stepping back from it, what it really tells us is the importance of having a regulated market. Because really the vast majority of the problems were coming from the illicit market. And so if there was ever a good argument that says, regulate the hell out of it, but make sure it's safe, I think the vape situation was that situation.
So just building on that for a bit, the FDA just came out with a very formal statement that really challenged the essence of CBD, right, the hemp side of this category. It's still Schedule I, as everyone knows, at the federal level. And the notion of kind of quality control and regulation, has historically been in supplementation and other things, kind of the responsibility of the FDA. Yeah, so I had a question, which is, you were talking about the need for quality management, quality control. So on the THC side, to have real quality, we're going to have likely some kind of a regulation. Well, that's typically the FDA, right? However, the FDA has stepped out for now, right? The VA has stepped out for now. Anything federal has stepped out. Banking has stepped out, et cetera, right? So my first question, let's just break it down in pieces. My first question is, where do you see the regulation moving, or do you see it moving, and do you see that as the quality control mechanism that will find its way into this category?
So I do not believe that we will see any FDA or any other federal agency involvement until it's federally legal, until it's no longer Schedule I. It's really not their purview because it's not legal. Now, CBD, that's a whole different story. I welcome more regulation as it relates to that. I think people deserve to know that the products that they are taking are safe and are made professionally and made with the same standards that you would want any supplement or food additive to be made. So we have already begun transitioning our facilities to being GMP certified, good manufacturing practices. Our CPG facility, our CBD facility is both GMP certified and kosher certified. So I think that cannabis companies would be doing themselves a big favor to be thinking about this and moving towards it now before it's required, because it will be required.
Righto. So the most recent letter from the FDA on the CBD side now, which not only did they send out a bunch of letters, which they've been doing, for quite some time, but they took a very hard position on CBD. What do you think the impact of that will be on short-term volume as it relates to your company?
Well, we're just getting started, honestly. We just launched our CBD line less than 2 months ago. What the issue with CBD, which as we know, it's no longer Schedule I because of the Farm Bill. But the FDA has not ruled on its use as a food additive or a supplement. And of course, what they're worried about and what the letters are all about are people making unsubstantiated health claims. So as long as you stay away from that, you're not really... I don't think there's any real big FDA issue. Of course, as a marketer, it sort of ties your hands because you're not allowed to say what it is about this product that would make somebody want to buy it. But I think that until the FDA clarifies its position, many mainstream retailers are not going to put ingestible CBD on the shelves.
Right, no, I agree with that. And of course, we've seen Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid move against non-ingestibles, so they're taking topicals, etc. And we're seeing that quite broadly across the industry. Okay, so, I mean, just a quick point to the audience, and then I'd like to come back with one additional question. And that is simply this, that regardless of where the FDA is, regardless of where regulation is, what the Wana Brands folks are doing and what Nancy is leading is really the notion of getting out ahead of regulation. Use GMP principles, kind of think of yourself almost as pharma-like. And if you adhere to those kinds of principles, when Schedule 1 gets lifted, when the FDA gets more engaged, you'll be in a position to move forward as they are quite expediently. All right, I do have one final question. I typically like to just kind of open the mic up and just kind of offer you. So you got a lot of people listening to what you have to say as it relates to cannabis, as it relates to the power of plants in a wellness context. You know, kind of what would you like to say to kind of the more global audience? We are indeed being listened to in 7 countries, so hopefully they're listening to it in English, because that's all you and I, well, certainly that's all what this is. So anyway, what would you have to say to kind of to them as it relates to, you know, your closing thoughts?
I would say that already there are so many different ways that you can curate the experience that you can have with cannabis. You can choose the product form you want, you can choose the dosage you want, you can choose the level of psychoactivity that you want through THC and CBD ratios. And then, of course, there's things like flavor and all of that good stuff, too. So I would really encourage people who are interested to try it in the way that feels the safest to them. If it's a topical, that's a great way to try. If it's a low dose, a micro dose of an edible, that's a great way to try. But that there's so much good to be done with this plant. There's so many more harsh prescription medications that it could be effective in replacing, that I would just want people to know that there are options. They don't have to be scared by the psychoactivity.
All right, outstanding. I guess everybody now understands why Nancy and the Wana Brands are leaders in the space. And I want to thank you, Nancy, for spending the time with us. I know it's a busy day here at this show, and virtually the entire industry is here. So thanks again for appearing.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, all the best. All right, so listen, I want to thank Nancy Whiteman, CEO of Wana Brands, and as I said earlier, named as one of the most powerful women in the space. And now you all have a good sense for why she got that recognition. All right, when we come back, we will move on to the next segment of our show, responding to your messages with the best letters we've got following last week's show.
The Alchemist Kitchen celebrates the power of plants. They're the leading destination in New York City for CBD. Their organic CBD hemp flower is grown in upstate New York. So come on down and talk to one of their herbalists to learn about how CBD may relieve stress, anxiety, and pain. Located at 21 East 1st Street, right near the Bowery. Mention NYCBD for special savings for your first purchase. See you soon. Or visit them online at thealchemistkitchen.com. That's the ALCHEMIST kitchen.com.
Welcome back to NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill, right here on 710 WOR Radio in New York City. All right, don't forget we have a blog. My blog is medium.com/@JeffreyHill2. That's medium.com/@JeffreyHill2. And, of course, we've got the full social range of media, and the show, of course, becomes a podcast. You can search any of that at NYCBD Official. All right, let's move on to the next segment of our show, our letters. The first letter comes from Janine from Trenton, New Jersey. She says, my son Tony just got arrested for a very small amount of marijuana, less than 1/4 of 1 ounce. He got it in Massachusetts, where he secured it legally, but had it in his car when he got stopped by an illegal change of lane on the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey. So, net, he got it legally in Massachusetts. Does that help his case? Well, Janine, I don't have good news for you. Not at all. All right. First, there was nothing wrong with him buying or consuming the product in Massachusetts.
Should have just stayed there.
It's a fully legal state. And if he stayed there or gave it to his friends before he left, absolute no issue. His problem started when he drove across the state line into New York or to your home state of New Jersey. All right. He could have been stopped at the state line by the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency. Why? Schedule 1. And that is a federal regulation crossing state line. That's either the DEA or the FBI. In both instances, it's illegal within that group. All right? Despite the fact that New Jersey is going to a legal left referendum as early as January, February of this year to make cannabis legal, completely adult use legal in the state, right? And the governor is fully committed, as is the assembly. New Jersey police are still stopping and arresting 100 people a day for cannabis-only offenses. All right? 100 people a day are falling into the same problem that your son fell into, right? Okay. So what does that mean? Unfortunately, that means go get yourself an attorney and hope for the judge that simply says to the police people involved with this arrest, why are you continuing to arrest people and bring them in front of me and forcing me to do something that we all know is going to be made legal in 3 months, right? That's the issue. Unfortunately, she's on the wrong side of the power curve. The timing is February, not now. As of now, it's illegal. As of now, there are people in jail for 7 to 10 years for the same problem. All right, so I wish you well and look forward to hearing from you on what took place. All right, on to our next letter. Flips, any thoughts on that before we roll along here?
I feel like that happens too much now.
Yeah, you've done
We've
right.
gotten that letter a lot. That same similar.
How many
issue.
times have I said the exact same thing on the show?
Yeah.
I mean, that story is repeating itself constantly.
Just use your common sense, people.
Well, that too, but on the other hand, I mean, what the common sense says that the laws are not fundamentally built on common sense, right? I mean, there's a little of that too, right? That's what these people are confused about.
Yeah.
Right? All right, on to our second letter from Jerry in Massachusetts. I've been having nothing but problems sleeping for the past several years. I've been taking Ambien somewhat effectively. Can CBD help me sleep? Can I use it in lieu of Ambien? Ambien works, but I'm a little concerned about what it's doing to my body. Well, Jerry, I'm not in the business of providing medical advice, as you all know. All right. All I can say is there's a lot of anecdotal evidence suggesting many people are using CBD effectively to help them sleep. I myself was an Ambien user. I myself stopped using Ambien and began using various forms of CBD and have found it to be quite effective. That's a personal situation. That's not a claim. All right. My encouragement is to talk to your doctor and then go ahead and see how it works for you. Right. CBD is legal in all 50 states. Go on out. Make sure you have a quality product. Purchase the product. Try 15 or 20 milligrams before bed. See how it goes. All right. There you go. The two letters we picked that had the most impact on both Flips and myself. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show and our guest, Nancy Whiteman, CEO of Wanda Brands. I again want to remind everybody before I continue that I want to wish everybody a
happy holiday.
Happy holiday, of course. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and any of the other holidays that we're all celebrating. Yep. And we'll be back for another show before New Year's, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we'll be back next week for another 60 minutes of the critical issues facing cannabis and CBD. Yes, the financial implications, the political implications, the societal implications. I've got a very good guest for next week. I promise you should come back and watch or listen. Remember, knowledge is built brick by brick. Today you got my 30-second brick. Until next week, this is NYCBD with Jeffrey Hill.